Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, A. Strakkaby SDISEY says, B. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, C. Strakkaby SDISEY says, D. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, E. Strakkaby SDISEY says, F. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, G.
These bonds aren't easily broken.
Charging up my shields.
Strakkaby SDISEY says, H. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, I. Strakkaby SDISEY says, K. Strakkaby SDISEY says, J.
Charging shields. Always ready with the fallback.
Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, Rip, now we have to start over. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, A. Strakkaby SDISEY says, B.
Faster, faster, faster. Hold on, recharging shields.
Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, C. Strakkaby SDISEY says, D. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, E. Strakkaby SDISEY says, F. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, G. Strakkaby SDISEY says, H. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, I. Strakkaby SDISEY says, J. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, K. Strakkaby SDISEY says, L. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, M. Strakkaby SDISEY says, N. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, O. Strakkaby SDISEY says, P. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, Q. Strakkaby SDISEY says, R. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, S. Strakkaby SDISEY says, T. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, U. Strakkaby SDISEY says, V. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, W. Strakkaby SDISEY says, X. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, Y. Stropka BSDISCY says, Z. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, XD. Stropka BSDISCY says, we did it. Noise UU says, C. Lilminx the Spooky Weeb says, we did it. Noise UU.